We have a lot of new updates for you guys. We've been hard at work building the simulator and everything is going full steam ahead. Let's start with my latest projects. Here you can see that I've built the world clock, which used to sit out at the entrance of Tomorrowland in 1955. It stood there until Tomorrowland was rebuilt in 1967, so you'll likely see this clock and the old version of Tomorrowland on two different maps when you play the game. The clock was relatively easy to build, consisting of basically a cylinder that was altered and bent into shape. The biggest challenge was the flower bed around the base of the clock, which will get textures of plants and flowers and then likely be overlaid with 3D plants and flowers to help it look more realistic. Preston has already told me that he plans to make the clock functional, and it will tell the real time. This world clock was a 24-hour clock, and it showed you the time at most of the time zones around the planet, but because of the way time zones are laid out and the fact that some countries don't abide by the time zone they would normally be placed in, the clock could not be 100% accurate back then, and it certainly won't be in this game. We had a volunteer join the group, Itai. At the moment, he is our materials mapper, and to show us where each material will change, he used basic colors as indicators. When the time comes for this model to be brought into Unreal Engine, Preston will use his own materials and textures from his catalog and software to finalize the model. For now, the model is as complete as it can be for this stage in the project, and it will await its future placement in Disneyland Railroad Simulator. The twin Tomorrowland buildings from 1955 have also been mapped for materials. I'm having difficulty though because I need to join all the meshes together, but whenever I do, the water fountain pools out front get their faces reversed, which is a bad thing because then they will look all messed up. I have to figure out how to prevent that. I'm currently working on the third Tomorrowland project, which will be the Rocket to the Moon attraction. Here's the model as it stands. This will be one of the handful of buildings in the game that you can explore at your leisure. You'll be able to go inside and see what it looks like. This was important to me because I've always been fascinated by this original Tomorrowland building, and I've wanted to see the insides of it. Using photographs and a really basic patent illustration, I was able to reverse engineer everything in order to come up with the dimensions and shapes of everything I needed to build. In fact, I discovered that each theater was surrounded in a circular corridor that accessed the three doorways in the original theater. That's something I didn't even know existed until recently. I thought, like most Disneyland attractions, that you have an entrance and an exit door and it just opened straight into the auditorium, but with this specific attraction, there was a themed corridor designed to make you feel like you were walking around inside the rocket itself. Think of it like the interior passages of Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. Before you and your friends load into the cockpit, they take you to it by guiding you through the corridor. Not only that, but on Smuggler's Run, the way you board the Millennium Falcon is by walking down a gantry tunnel. Well, Rocket to the Moon had that too. There's only one photograph I know of that shows the fully themed lighting of the interior of the auditorium, and it will provide a much needed guide for how we light the interior of the ride. It's weird because if it weren't for how the guests were dressed in this image, I would think that this is an auditorium for a Disney attraction just 20 or 30 years ago. It looks like a fully themed and well-illuminated space, not at all how I would expect an opening day Disneyland attraction to look. I mean, yes, the Imagineers were talented, but many opening day attractions were rather lackluster as the Imagineers were starting to get used to telling stories in this new theme park medium. But this one photograph really shows why Disneyland was such a success, because this atmosphere really sells the experience that you're on a futuristic rocket about to take a commercial flight to the far side of the moon. And I hope the model I'm building does that experience some justice, and you'll be able to experience a little piece of this attraction. Now on to more exciting news. Preston is about 80% done with building the locomotive and tender models. He just recently built the cab, and he has just a few things to do here and there. Right now he's in the process of programming everything. In order to show me the progress so far, he built an alpha version and sent it to me so I can show it off. This alpha will not be publicly available, but in this video and a future live stream, you'll be able to see everything we have so far. In a few minutes, I'll even fire up the locomotive so you can see what functions it has so far. For now, I'll show you the tender, and you can open the water hatch and see the actual water level in the tender. At Disneyland, they didn't have any fancy tender gauges or a tender sight glass. They checked the water level the old-fashioned way by taking a peek inside the tank to determine if they need to refill, and that's what you'll get to do in the game. Same thing for the fuel. You can open it and see the fuel level. Disneyland Railroad used to burn number 2 diesel oil. Today they use B98 biodiesel made from the used cooking oil around the park. In the original sim from 2017, you could open the water hatch, but not the fuel hatch, and it was impossible to tell by sight just how full the tender was. You had to use the game's menu feature to determine the water and fuel levels. Now that won't be such an issue. Moving along the front areas of the locomotive, you can see the brake cylinder between the drive wheels. In the original sim, the brake cylinder was modeled, but it wasn't functional. This time, it will be functional, and you'll see it move when you apply air pressure to the brake system. Disneyland's trains use what's called a straight air brake system, which, unlike modern air brakes, means that at Disneyland, if you want to put on the brakes to slow or stop a train, you have to apply air to the system instead of the modern method where you release air in order to apply the brakes. So that's something you'll need to get used to. The gearing and linkage systems under the boiler are fully modeled, and they will all move and operate according to the simulation. Now, I must stress that this is a true simulator. When you pull the throttle, the wheels won't move according to some pre-recorded program. The movement is not baked into the game. The movement is a simulation. That means the wheels cannot move unless there is a simulated steam pressure in the cylinders. But also, in the most basic sense, the wheels do not move unless the locomotive itself is moving. Here's something really neat. You'll be able to open all the little lubrication cups on the locomotive. All the external valves will eventually be able to rotate, and they'll operate with their intended function. And the front of the locomotive, you can open the firebox to peek inside. Also notice all the high-quality textures and materials the sim uses. You can get right up close to any object, and it will maintain a high-definition image and texture. Now here's the part of this update that I'm really stoked to show you. Preston imported all the passenger cars I made and started applying color and texture to them. Keep in mind, these may not be the final colors and textures. We just needed something to put together so that it looks nice for this update. Also, for now, all the doors and windows have been removed so that they can be animated in the future, because you'll be able to ride aboard these cars and open the doors and windows yourself. Maybe you'll even be able to turn the brake wheels, I don't know. But let's start with the freight train, originally known as Rhettaw 2 and later known as the Holiday Special, Holiday 2, and also known as Holiday Red. Yes, all 4 names have been used for this one train. You can see that the wood planks on the side of the gondola are visible in the sunlight, as well as the dome-headed bolts with washers and square nuts holding them in place. This car would have had little doors, since this is 1955, and under the car you can see the truss rods with the turnbuckles designed to reduce the downward bowing of the car when it is fully loaded. And further back you can see the silhouette of the brake cylinder and all the brake linkages. On the forward end of the car you can see the large bolt and square nut that holds the end of the truss rods in place, as well as the steel plate sockets for a procedure called pulling, where in the old days a locomotive on an adjacent track could move a freight car by pushing it with a pole. They never did that at Disneyland, but Walt was a stickler for authenticity, and many of the pole sockets still remain on the cars of the Disneyland Railroad to this day. On the back end of the car you can see the brake wheel system, and on the sides you can see the stanchion sockets that hold the wooden stanchions in place. The nearby cattle car also has many of these same details, but it has many more. There are a lot more grab irons, or as you might call handlebars, and there would have been a sliding door just like you see on the other side of the car. But keep in mind, that door is being programmed for animation, so right now it's missing. Inside the cattle car and gondola cars were simple green benches made of wood planks. They were meant for pregnant women, the elderly, and the disabled. Every able-bodied person was meant to stand, unless of course there was available space on the bench. Eventually, in 1957, these cars would be converted to have holiday-style benches, and all passengers would be expected to remain seated while the train was in motion. On the back end of the cattle car, we can see an extended brake wheel system. If we climb up the ladder, we have a catwalk where in the 1800s, a brakeman would have used this catwalk to get across the cars. They would climb down onto this brake platform to tighten or loosen the brakes depending on the whistle commands from the locomotive. Since the Disneyland trains have air brakes, it's not necessary to even worry about manually applying brakes, but they are all hooked up, so manual application is possible when the cars are on display just like they were in 2016. By the way, the Westinghouse straight air brake system was invented in 1869, so it is historically accurate for the Disneyland Railroad to be using air brakes since the trains are models of rolling stock from the 1870s through the 1890s. I built couplers for all the cars, but you'll notice that they're not here in the game. Again, the couplers will need to be programmed to swivel with the turning and movement of the cars. Now we make our way to the Caboose, and you can really see the miniature scale of the train here. The train is built in 5/8 of real size, to look more prototypical compared to the 3-foot narrow gauge of the rails. You'll be able to climb inside the Caboose and take a ride, but before we go inside, you can see artifacting on the exterior. The reason is because the Caboose was the first time I built side paneling, and I didn't quite know how to do it, but I have since completely rebuilt the wood siding with a newer technique I developed, and it will look perfectly fine when you get around to playing the game. Let's go inside the Caboose. Here you can see the main seating compartment. I've spent plenty of time riding inside this car at Disneyland, so I remember exactly what it looks like down to the last detail, and I've tried to recreate the experience as closely as I can. Normally, in this door frame is a locked door, but in the sim you'll be able to open the door and go beyond it. You'll be able to climb up inside the cupola and peer down at the train from the top. We'll have a different mode for the game where you won't need to drive the locomotive, you can just be a passenger all day if you want, and we'll make seats available to you across all the trains. Now here's the rear compartment of the Caboose where people used to sit. Again, today this area along with the cupola is blocked, so you can't explore it, but you will be able to in the sim. Let's move on to the Excursion train. This is the third train, added to the Disneyland Railroad in 1958 in time for the opening of the Grand Canyon diorama. The Excursion car was a bit of a challenge to replicate. There are lots of curves and designs in its architecture, but the result is rather accurate if I do say so myself. The benches all have a wood grain texture. At Disneyland, the benches are made of real wood, whereas the benches of the Walt Disney World trains are made of steel and fiberglass. The Excursion train was created by Imagineer Bob Gurr, and though it doesn't offer the best views of the park if you're sitting in the middle or the left side of the bench, the train itself is rather beautiful to look at from a distance. And eventually, when the model gets all its stencil designs and lettering and numbers, it will look fantastic. The Disneyland Excursion cars have only 4 lamps hanging from the ceiling, and they are spaced rather oddly apart. So if you think I didn't properly space them for the game, I would suggest you look at the Disneyland Excursion cars again, and you'll notice the lamps are spaced apart unevenly. Although I will admit, the OCD part of me wants to space them out properly. In any case, when we adjust the time of the sim to evening, the lamps provide a comfortable, warm glow. It's going to be beautiful to ride this train. The lamps are turned off when the train departs the station, so I'm sure that will be something we'll program in the game. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, the beautiful Rhettaw 1 train, the original passenger coaches that ran at Disneyland from 1955 until they were permanently retired in 1974. They were semi-retired in 1965 when the train was replaced by the identical Holiday 4 and Holiday 5 trains. But for the next 9 years, the original Rhettaw 1 would be pressed into service during days of inclement weather because the cars were enclosed and could shield guests from the winter cold and the soaking rain. And yes, Southern California does get very cold and rainy during certain times of the year. It's not uncommon to see frost in the winter mornings. Under the cars, you can see the frame, the truss rods, and the brake system. Right now, the passenger-style wheel trucks are missing because they will need to be built, but for now, we can go inside the first car, which is called the Combine. It stands for Combination Passenger and Baggage. The first compartment is the baggage area. All the luggage that passengers might take with them is carried here, as well as sacks of mail for the postal service. When Walt Disney was a kid, he worked as a news butch, selling newspapers and refreshments on passenger trains, much like this one. He spent his lunch break in the Combine, and so this car held a special place in Walt's heart. It hurt a little when he announced the semi-retirement of this train, but he knew it had to be done because the guests preferred the open layout of the holiday trains and even the Excursion. Now we float through the passenger seating area of the Combine, and notice that the benches near the doors are turned inward to provide more space for the doors to swing open. There was only one Combine, but the next car is a regular passenger coach, and there would have been 4 of these behind the Combine. There isn't much to note, but the chairs were taken from a school bus manufacturer, so that's why they have a familiar appearance. The windows were also from a school bus manufacturer, and they even had the same window locking clamps. Now, the trains of the Disneyland Railroad are built authentic and in miniature 5/8 scale, so some details had to be left out. Like on a passenger car, there would normally be special shelves above the seats to stow carry-on bags, but at Disneyland they need the headroom so people don't hit their foreheads on anything. Next, we float over to the last car of the train. In 1955, this was the observation car, called the Grand Canyon. An observation car is exactly what it sounds like. The windows are much bigger to provide better views for passengers to observe the passing landscapes. All the chairs faced each other and had fancy armrests. If we get down low to the floor, you can see the hand-carved details of the chair legs. And these carvings are accurate to the ones at Disneyland. Eventually, the Rhettaw one retired. The observation car was converted into the Lilybell private car. A private car is a luxury car owned by an individual person or company that pays the railroad to attach it to the end of their train. Think of it like a private jet or a party bus, but for people back in the days before jets were even invented. People often mistake the Lilybell as a presidential car, but it is not. A presidential car has the emblem of the office of the President of the United States, and it's covered in American flags. The Lilybell is not. At the end of the Grand Canyon observation car, we can see the drumhead logo for this specific train. It says Santa Fe and Disneyland Limited. And indeed, that is exactly what this train was referred to as, the Disneyland Limited. That's why even to this day, if you're at Main Street Station, the loudspeaker announcement still says,
"The Disneyland Limited, now arriving from a trip around Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom."
It's announcing a train that no longer runs at Disneyland. The Excursion train had a drumhead logo that said Santa Fe and Disneyland Excursion. And the 2 identical holiday trains had a drumhead logo that said Santa Fe and Disneyland Holiday. The freight train never had a drumhead, but it did carry the logo of the Disneyland Railroad on the sides of the cars. So as you can see, the passenger cars are here. We have the 2 1955 trains and then the 1958 Excursion train. The cars will be duplicated as necessary to have the full consists that existed in 1955. And as we build different maps of Disneyland for different decades, we'll adjust the trains to reflect the decades they're in. The 1960s will see the freight train not only get a consist of 8 cars instead of the 6 it started out with, but that's when you'll see the holiday benches and the red striped canvas tops. And you'll also eventually see the identical holiday trains that were introduced in 1964 and 1965. Believe me, I'll make sure those trains are included in the later versions of Disneyland you'll get to see in the game. Now, real quick, let me show you some of the firing functions of the CK Holiday that Preston was able to get done. We can open the fuel valve a little bit, and then we ignite a waste cloth and let the fire grow a bit before tossing it in and opening the atomizer. Once we get the fire going, we can build pressure. The colors of the valve wheels will be configurable so that you can customize the engine in a way that is easier for you. You'll also have a slider bar that will allow you to physically age the engine, and again, not only can the engine look older, but the various appliances can be made older and less reliable, for a more varied experience to shake things up. Now, in the final game that you guys will play, you'll be able to either have a quick engine start option, which is helpful for getting the train going when you're short on time, or you can choose to fire up the engine from cold, which will actually take a few hours to do. You'll have an automatic fireman who can do all the firing and water levels for you, or you can choose to do all that yourself. You can have the fireman inject water into the boiler, or you can do that. Everything will have options for you. You'll have control over the time and weather. You'll have the option to operate the trains in Disneyland or in a fictional ranch with beautiful natural scenery. You'll even have the option to not run the train at all and just choose to be a passenger, enjoying endless laps around the park. You'll be able to explore the park on foot and walk inside various buildings and train stations, and you'll have a version of Disneyland for every decade. This will really be a game you're going to love. It will be available for Windows PC users on Steam, although we don't know when the game will be ready. It probably won't be ready until sometime next year, but we hope that you'll stay with us for the journey and watch these updates on my channel or the Highball Sim channel. The Disneyland Railroad Simulator will be designed with a serious look at replicating history. It won't be some kind of cartoon world that resembles Disneyland. It will be as realistic as we can possibly make it, and allow you to be transported back in time in ways that you've always wanted. And most importantly, the steam locomotive operations will be dead accurate. So much so that it might be a useful tool for people who want to learn how to fire and operate steam locomotives. Thanks for joining me for this update. Like and subscribe for more, and we'll see you on the next one.